When I look back on how things started with Ava, I can't help but feel a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. We met back in college, both of us brimming with ambition and excitement for the future. From the moment we started talking, it was like we clicked instantly. Ava seemed like everything I could ever want in a partner: stunning, intelligent, and full of energy. We were inseparable, and I genuinely believed I had found my soulmate. Life seemed to be moving at lightning speed, and I was sure we were headed for a lifetime of happiness. But as the years rolled on, reality set in. Those carefree, spontaneous days gave way to the grind of raising kids, building careers, and dealing with all the baggage that comes with family. The vibrant, affectionate woman I fell in love with slowly became someone I barely recognized. It felt like everything we did revolved around responsibilities, leaving no room for the us that once felt unshakable. What used to be an undeniable connection turned into a distant memory. I realized I was stuck in a marriage that bore no resemblance to the dream I'd imagined. Physical intimacy became a rare occurrence, maybe once a month, and only if Ava wasn't mad about something. It was such a stark contrast to the early days when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Back then, it was 4 or 5 times a week, and her passion was one of the many reasons I fell so hard for her. Now, she's distant, almost indifferent, like she couldn't care less about being close. Ava has 2 sisters, Hannah and Amanda, who were always known for being spirited, especially when it came to their love lives. I used to feel like the luckiest guy in the world when Ava chose me. We tied the knot 12 years ago when Ava got pregnant during our senior year of college. We were already talking about marriage, so it felt like a natural step. Our daughter Chloe arrived 5 months later, and about a year and a half after that, our son Noah was born. From the start, Ava's family never really accepted me. They've always looked down on me, thinking I wasn't good enough for Ava or the life they thought she deserved. Her parents, sisters, and their husbands lived off inherited money, never working a day in their lives. Funny thing is, they're nearly broke now, not that they'd ever admit it. I only know because I've checked the property records. Both of Ava's sisters married men with decent finances. Hannah's husband, Lucas, runs a chain of dry cleaning businesses, while Amanda's husband, Ryan, inherited a house and a hefty sum from his grandparents. Ryan claims to manage a marketing firm, but I've never seen any evidence of him doing actual work. Like Ava, they're a blast at parties, but when it comes to the real, everyday grind, they're pretty useless. 2 years ago, I hit rock bottom. I was sitting in my office after yet another morning of taking care of myself in the shower, and it finally hit me: my life was a train wreck. A practically non-existent sex life, a wife who does next to nothing, and kids who couldn't care less about respecting me. On top of that, I'm stuck in a job I despise, working for a company that treats us like expendable servants. We live in a house that's far too big, surrounded by her family, in a place where winter seems to last forever. As someone who grew up in the South and can't stand the cold, it feels like punishment. And my car? A beat-up, old thing that used to be hers, she wrecked it, traded in mine, and bought herself a brand new one. God forbid I even think about driving her car unless I'm in the mood for an argument and a few weeks of being ignored in the bedroom. Our finances are a mess too. We're stuck paying for a house we don't need, meds for a sickly dog that should have been put down years ago, and a maid who comes twice a week because Ava says cleaning is too exhausting. Funny enough, that arrangement only improved our intimacy for about 2 months before everything went back to the same cold routine. But the maid? She's still here. We're also footing the bill for Ava's clubhouse membership, where she spends her days with her sisters and their friends. I don't even play golf. Then there are the endless expenses for her wardrobe, hairstyling, and tennis lessons for her and the kids, none of whom show any real talent or interest. The vacations are another sore spot. We take 3 every year, and they're all about what Ava and her family want. There's the winter ski trip, which I can't even enjoy because of my bad knee. Then there's the spring trip to a big city, which is just an excuse for her to go on shopping sprees. And the summer beach vacation? I'm not even invited. Holidays are always spent with her family. Meanwhile, my parents live in a small, cozy bungalow on a southern beach, a place I'd love to visit more often. But Ava refuses, claiming it's too small for her standards. It's suffocating, being surrounded by her family all the time. They've never respected me. They make snide remarks and laugh at the fact that I didn't come from money like they did. No matter how hard I work to provide for Ava and the kids, it feels like nothing I do is ever good enough for them. As if everything else wasn't bad enough, Ava was cheating on me. Yeah, she's a liar and a cheat. But I didn't stumble across the truth by chance. A few months before I hit rock bottom, I started putting the pieces together. I wanted to figure out why Ava seemed so content without any intimacy in our marriage. Either she had completely lost interest, or she was getting it elsewhere. So, I decided to dig deeper and find out for myself. These days, getting your hands on surveillance tools isn't hard. I went all in: spyware, audio recorders, cameras, you name it. The first thing I did was set up a recorder in her car, hardwired to the battery to make sure it would last. Next, I installed cameras in nearly every room of the house, steering clear of the kids' bedrooms, of course. I even covered the outside areas, the patio, the pool, and the garage. All the footage fed straight to my computer. It didn't take long before I figured out the passcode to her phone by listening to one of the recordings. One night, in the dead of night around 3 a.m., I unlocked her phone and installed tracking software. It gave me access to everything: calls, texts, apps, the works. That's when the trail of her betrayal really started to unfold. To make sure I stayed one step ahead, I upgraded our internet to a business plan. That way, I could remotely access my computer from anywhere using my phone. About 2 weeks later, while the rest of the house was asleep, I sat down and listened to one of the recordings from Ava's car. What I heard was like a sucker punch straight to the gut. "Can you meet this Thursday? 10 works for me. I can't wait to ride you hard," a man's voice said. "Me too, babe. Love you," Ava replied. Hearing those words felt like a bomb went off inside me. Strangely, though, I didn't feel sad, just pure, white-hot anger. I slammed the computer shut and took the dog for a long walk, boiling with fury. By the time morning rolled around, the weight of it all came crashing down on me. I was stuck in a marriage with a cheating wife, living a one-sided, miserable life. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I had to get out, but before I could, I needed to know exactly who her lover was and gather undeniable proof. When I went through Ava's phone, there weren't any incriminating messages. That's when it hit me: she must have a second phone. Late one night, after I got home from work, I searched her car. Hidden in the air vent, secured with Velcro, was her secret phone. Using the same passcode, I unlocked it, installed tracking software, and put it back where I found it. The messages I retrieved painted a picture I wasn't prepared for: 2 years' worth of deleted texts that revealed the shocking truth. Ava and her sisters had been swapping stories about their affairs, comparing their lovers' performances, and even joking about trading partners. Ava's most recent fling was with none other than our daughter's soccer coach. Hannah had been chasing a grocery store clerk, though Ava and Amanda had warned her about getting involved with unmarried men. Their mom even had rules about cheating. Amanda, meanwhile, was sleeping with a mechanic who had apparently been with all 3 sisters, and their mom, too. Ava had hooked up with Lucas and Ryan, her sisters' husbands, more than once. Her sisters encouraged her to keep them under control. I realized I couldn't just leave. That would be too easy. I wanted to burn it all down, to make sure there was no alimony, no custody of the kids, who Ava had already spoiled beyond repair, and no way for Ava or her family to come out unscathed. My first move was to create chaos within their little circle. Acting clueless, I started picking petty fights with Ava over household chores, pushing her until she lashed out at me. After a week of escalating arguments, I moved into the guest room, preparing for the long game. Meanwhile, I started plotting how to bring her sisters and their toxic family into the crosshairs. Whenever I visited Hannah and Amanda's houses, I paid close attention. I discreetly snapped photos of things like alarm clocks, wall clocks, smoke detectors, and even a doorbell cover. Since I had already replaced the smoke detectors in our own house, I knew exactly what I needed to pull this off. After some searching, I found matching parts on eBay. Once the pieces arrived, I rigged up hidden cameras and installed them in each of their homes. The final step came when I hosted a pool party and invited the whole family over. While everyone was distracted, I borrowed their keys and installed monitoring software on their phones. Thanks to earlier recordings, I already knew their passcodes. By the end of the day, I had a direct line into their lives, and a plan to unravel everything they held dear. At the party, I staged a little scene by accidentally dropping a bag of ice on the ground. It didn't take long for Hannah to snap at me. "Can't you do anything right? Go get more ice," she barked. I muttered an apology and left, seizing the opportunity to swing by their houses and finish setting up the surveillance equipment. When I got back, Amanda greeted me with her usual sarcasm. "Well, that took forever. What happened? Did you forget how to drive?" I came up with a quick excuse about having a flat tire, but no one cared enough to respond, let alone thank me. A couple of days later, the cameras started delivering results. I caught Amanda and the mechanic tearing through her house in a frenzied, chaotic mess, clothes flung everywhere, no warm-up, just straight to business. When they were done, the mechanic said he had to head out before his wife started asking questions. Amanda tried to convince him to stick around for another round, but he brushed her off, saying he needed to conserve his energy for his wife. To top it off, the guy punched in his phone passcode right in front of the camera, giving me an unexpected bonus. The following Thursday, I broke into his place while they were busy and installed tracking software on his phone. From there, things got even wilder. Hannah's secret lover turned out to be none other than her own uncle, with her aunt fully on board. The three of them stripped down and jumped right into it. Watching that unfold was so unsettling, I actually wished I was watching National Geographic instead. To my surprise, I also caught Ava in action, with Holly, the gorgeous redhead who lives next door. The two of them spent the whole time making out, and oddly enough, I didn't find it as infuriating as I expected. It was almost fascinating. Afterward, Holly took a shower and walked back home, looking a bit unsteady on her feet. But the real jaw-dropper came later that night when Lucas and Ryan sauntered into Hannah's bedroom and started undressing. Watching that, I made a mental note to never shake hands with those guys again. Footage from Ava's parents' house also turned up some gems, though I skipped over most of it to avoid seeing them in compromising positions. Even so, I couldn't completely avoid the sight of her uncle hooking up with her mom while her dad sat nearby, watching like it was a TV show. And when Ava's mom pulled out what looked like an industrial jackhammer to take things up a notch, I couldn't help but wonder if the entire house was rattling from the noise. In the end, gathering this evidence was shockingly easy, but it left me deeply unsettled. As I sifted through hours of footage, a bizarre thought crossed my mind: what if I could get Morgan Freeman to narrate these tapes? Now, you might be wondering about the legality of all this. Honestly, I couldn't care less. I never intended to bring this stuff into a courtroom. My real goal was to make sure no one else would want these tapes dragged into legal proceedings either. Before taking the next step, though, I needed to cover my tracks by removing the cameras and recorders from their homes. Pulling them out was simple enough. I threw another pool party and, just like before, accidentally dropped a bag of ice. Ava wasted no time sneering, "Great job, genius." Hannah joined in with, "Does he even have a brain in there?" and Amanda piled on, asking, "Didn't you leave them in your purse?" The whole group laughed, even my daughter Chloe, who muttered, "Mom, why is he always so embarrassing?" Lucas chimed in with, "Next time, just ask for help," and Ryan added, "Yeah, one of the girls could teach you." Finally, my son Noah delivered the final blow, saying, "Man up, Dad." The laughter felt like a collective gut punch, as if mocking me was their favorite family sport. But their ridicule gave me the perfect excuse to slip away and retrieve the hidden cameras. I replaced them with new ones, grabbed another bag of ice, and returned to the party like nothing had happened. With the equipment reset, I moved on to phase 2, sending out the evidence. The first bombshell went to Amanda and Ryan, footage of Amanda with the mechanic, along with a message that left no room for doubt. Next, I sent the clips of Hannah with her uncle and aunt to both her and Lucas, adding a little note, "You shouldn't mess with someone else's husband." Did this unleash chaos? Not exactly. The sisters ran straight to their mom, who delivered her predictable line, "It's for the children's sake. It was just a mistake. She loves you." But here's the kicker, their mom pulled each son-in-law aside privately and fed them the same lie, "You're our favorite. When the time comes, we'll leave everything to you and your wife." Each of them believed they were the chosen one, completely unaware they'd all been played. I sent Lucas and Ryan their own incriminating videos, pairing each with a straightforward message, "File for divorce on infidelity grounds, or this goes public." It didn't take long. Within a week, both men had filed for divorce. While they vented about their soon-to-be ex-wives, I casually dropped a bombshell. "You know," I said offhandedly, "the in-laws aren't exactly swimming in cash. They've got a second mortgage, no savings, and no social security. They never worked a day in their lives." That revelation was the final nail in the coffin for Lucas and Ryan. Realizing their wives' supposed wealth was nothing but smoke and mirrors, they both filed using the same attorney. The fallout was swift and brutal. My in-laws, who had always prided themselves on their status, were blindsided when they learned Lucas and Ryan weren't as well off as they had pretended. Lucas, who loved to flaunt his wealth, turned out to be nothing more than a manager at his father's dry cleaning store, living in a house gifted to him as a wedding present. Ryan's situation wasn't much better. His inheritance, which he had so proudly boasted about, turned out to be far smaller than he'd imagined, and most of it went to Amanda in the divorce. As for the house everyone assumed he owned, it belonged to his parents, who had already cut him off. Amanda tried to stay there, but her efforts were ruined when my mother-in-law threatened Ryan's father. He wasn't having it, he hung up on her and put the house up for sale within 2 days. Ryan's entire life unraveled. The so-called marketing firm he claimed to run, it was all a lie. He had actually been fired from his first job for sexual misconduct. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law made things even worse for herself. She ended up in jail after confronting the mechanic's wife in a coffee shop. The confrontation turned physical when my mother-in-law slapped her, only for the mechanic's wife to fight back, breaking her nose and leaving her with 2 black eyes. The whole incident was caught on camera, including one I'd discreetly placed in my mother-in-law's car. As they waited for the police to arrive, the mechanic's wife turned to her and asked, "Why do you think I sent the videos?" With blood still dripping from her broken nose, my mother-in-law sneered, "Because he said you weren't good in bed. Did you really think you could keep him all to yourself when we were willing to share?" Not wanting the mechanic to walk away unscathed, I sent his wife the video of him with Amanda, along with his stash of trophy photos and incriminating texts. 3 months later, she divorced him, too. At a family gathering not long after, Lucas and Ryan, both drunk, started whining to me about their failed marriages. Ryan admitted he had married Amanda hoping her parents' supposed fortune would help him patch things up with his own father. Instead, most of his trust fund was gone. Lucas, on the other hand, confessed he had married Hannah thinking he'd inherit his father's dry cleaning business. But now that his dad's new wife was pregnant, he doubted he'd get a dime. In the end, the sisters' obsession with marrying into wealth had blinded them to the truth. that their husbands were just as broke as they were. Both Hannah and Amanda ended up moving back in with their parents, dragging their kids along. My once proud in-laws now found themselves saddled with the mess their daughters had created. My mother-in-law didn't hide her frustration, grumbling, "Do we really have to put up with those two witches and their bratty kids?" With the sisters out of their marriages, my little side project was starting to pay off. Things at home improved, if only slightly. Ava even threw me a rare compliment, saying I was doing a better job as the breadwinner than her sister's exes ever had. Of course, it didn't take long for that to turn into yet another joke at my expense. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law's time recovering from her nose surgery gave me a much-needed break from her constant meddling. Her nose healed crooked and noticeably larger, a minor but satisfying victory. However, my growing frustration with my boss, Jason, was becoming hard to ignore. As the company expanded, he'd turned greedy and self-centered. Our once generous bonuses, which used to be $16,000, had dwindled to less than $2,000. With rising costs and inflation, my paycheck was effectively shrinking every year. Since my surveillance skills had proven so effective with my family, I decided to apply them to Jason. I expanded my little hobby to include his office, home, and even his secretary Tara's apartment. Rumors had been swirling about Jason and Tara having an affair, and it didn't take much effort to confirm them. During a management meeting, I swiped a copy of Tara's apartment key and installed cameras and monitoring software. With access to their phones, I quickly uncovered their routine Thursday meetups at Tara's place. The video evidence was damning, and honestly, a little pathetic. Jason wasn't just a cheater, he was a terrible one. He barely lasted seconds, so I didn't have to watch for long. Tara and I always got along well enough at work, but I never saw her the way most of the other guys did. She was strictly professional, always wearing long skirts and little to no makeup. Honestly, I'd assumed she was on the heavier side. But after reviewing the surveillance videos, I realized just how wrong I was. Tara was far from overweight, she was in great shape, the kind of person who clearly worked out regularly. It was obvious she dressed in oversized clothes to avoid drawing any attention. After a few weeks of watching and waiting, I decided it was time to leave my job. I'd built the company's software from the ground up, and I knew Jason would need me sooner or later. Sure enough, not long after I left, an old part of the code mysteriously got corrupted, and the backups conveniently disappeared, a little mistake by IT. I started working from home, keeping my schedule more or less the same. 2 weeks later, as I'd expected, Jason came crawling back, practically begging me to return. This time, though, I made sure it was on my terms. I negotiated a contract that doubled my previous hourly rate, meaning I could now earn 4 times my old salary with overtime. Once everything was in writing, I went back and rewrote the corrupted code from memory, adding upgrades and features the sales team had been requesting for months. The adjustments I made to the other modules only improved the system further, making my work indispensable. Customers loved the updates, and within 30 days, my contract was extended indefinitely. Around the same time, Ava received an unexpected letter from an attorney. It turned out a distant relative of hers had passed away, leaving behind a trust fund. The fund paid $4,000 a month to a family member of good moral character, with a catch: if that person had a child named after the relative or his late wife, the payment would increase to $20,000 a month. Because of her sister's well-documented bad behavior, Ava was the only one considered eligible. After meeting with the attorneys and signing the paperwork, the first check arrived, and Ava couldn't have been happier. She was ecstatic, going on and on about quitting birth control and having another baby to secure the bigger payout. But when we got home, I knew it was time to have a serious conversation. "We need to talk," I told her. Ava, too excited to notice my tone, kept texting on her phone. When she finally looked up, I motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table. "I quit my job a year ago," I began, "and things didn't exactly go as planned." Her face twisted in disbelief. "What? And you're just now telling me this? I started my own software company, I explained. It's working, but it's taking longer than I'd hoped. Her expression shifted, her initial concern melting away. Well, that doesn't matter anymore, she said dismissively, waving her hand. We've got plenty of money now, and there's more on the way. She stood up to kiss me, but I stopped her before she could. I'm never going to have sex with you again, I said flatly. Ava froze in place, the color draining from her face. What did you just say? She asked, her voice barely audible. I said I'm never going to have sex with you again, I repeated, my tone calm and steady. Her initial shock quickly turned to anger. Who the hell do you think you are? After everything I've put up with, you're seriously saying this now? I leaned back in my chair, unfazed by her outburst. I'm the guy who finally realized he deserves better, I said evenly. She slammed her phone onto the table, pointing an accusing finger at me. Listen, you worthless piece of garbage, she spat. We're going to have sex, we're going to have a baby, or I'll divorce you. Got it? I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. Go ahead. Divorce me. I'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and make sure you walk away with nothing. Her defiance faltered, her tone softening as she realized I wasn't bluffing. It was just sex, she muttered. I don't love them. I only love you. Let's not throw away everything we've built together. Built? I snapped back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. What exactly have we built, Ava? A life where I'm nothing but a doormat? A marriage where my sole purpose is to be your personal ATM? Be honest with yourself. All of this, everything you've done, it's finally catching up to you. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a heavy sigh. The cheating was a mistake, she murmured. I love you. I just want things to go back to the way they used to be. I let out a bitter laugh. Back to the way they were. Sure, let's go to the bedroom right now and pretend none of this ever happened. Her face lit up with hope, and she reached out to touch my arm. Really? You mean it? She asked, her voice filled with desperation. No, I replied coldly. I was lying. Funny how easy it is to believe someone, isn't it? Kind of gives you a taste of what it's like to be on the other side. Her expression crumbled, and for a moment, it looked like she might cry. Do you really mean that? She asked, her voice trembling. Nope, I said bluntly. I lied again. It gets easier the more you do it. Her panic was unmistakable now. You can't do this to me, she cried. My parents are billionaires. You'll never have to worry about money again. You could have an unlimited allowance for life. I stared at her, unimpressed. Not funny, Ava. Isn't it exhausting, talking to someone who lies right to your face? Tears filled her eyes as she struggled to regain control. I won't lie again, she pleaded. I promise. Let's just move on from this. I shook my head slowly. I'm not sure I believe you. She grasped at straws, her desperation growing. We could throw a party this weekend, she suggested, her tone almost frantic. Invite everyone over. You'll see how much my family loves you. I gave her a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Sounds like a blast. Will Ryan and Lucas be there? Of course, she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. You're not lying to me again, are you? She asked cautiously. No, I said, my grin widening. This is going to be a party to remember. The morning of the party, I woke to the sound of someone fumbling with the lock on the guest room door. Ava was trying to pick it. I stayed silent, listening as she eventually gave up and walked away, muttering under her breath. Moments later, I heard her on the phone, calling family members to invite them. Through the surveillance system, I listened in on every call. It was almost comical how much effort she had to put into convincing them to come. She bribed Hannah and Amanda with promises of sharing the monthly trust fund payments. Lucas and Ryan were lured with the promise of extra attention if they showed up. Her parents initially declined, but the second she mentioned the $20,000 a month potential, they changed their tune. In fact, they even started scheming with her to find a way to cut me out of the trust once a baby was born. What stung the most was hearing her talk to Chloe and Noah. She had to offer them bigger allowances and future car upgrades just to get them to treat me with basic decency. When that didn't work, she resorted to threats, saying she'd take away their phones and cancel vacations if they embarrassed her during the party. Begrudgingly, they agreed to behave. The day of the party felt like stepping into a bizarre alternate reality. Everyone acted overly polite, their fake smiles barely masking the tension. Ava's parents greeted me like I was their favorite son-in-law, a complete 180 from their usual disdain. Lucas and Ryan were oddly friendly, though it was clear their civility was forced. I played along, pretending not to notice the awkward glances and strained conversations. At one point, I casually mentioned to Amanda that I'd seen her boss at a downtown hotel recently. Her face turned pale, and she stumbled over her words, trying to laugh it off. I knew exactly where she'd been the night before, and I wasn't about to let her forget it. Later, I found Lucas and Ryan at the bar and struck up a casual conversation. When they mentioned a certain club, I smirked. "Oh, that place. I hear it's where divorced guys go to get drunk and taken advantage of." They chuckled nervously, unsure if I was joking or not. As the night went on, I approached my father-in-law and dropped a little bombshell. "I think I saw you and your brother at a restaurant the other day with a young woman named Ansley," I said, watching his reaction carefully. My mother-in-law's sharp glare could have cut through steel. What she didn't know was that Ansley was a transgender woman they'd met at a hotel. My father-in-law stammered something about a business meeting and quickly excused himself, his discomfort obvious. Later in the evening, my mother-in-law cornered me by the pool. "Nice party," she said, though her tone made it clear she meant the exact opposite. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "It's great to see everyone gathered together." She glanced around, her face souring as her eyes settled on Lucas and Ryan. "At least they're staying friends despite everything. That's good for the kids." I smiled knowingly, catching the implication behind her words. "Hannah and Amanda will bounce back eventually," I replied. Although, balancing full-time jobs and raising the kids might make finding new romance challenging. Her lips tightened, and I could tell she didn't appreciate the reminder of how far her daughters had fallen. Taking the conversation in a different direction, I casually brought up Chloe and Noah's recent progress in school and suggested hosting a celebratory pool party, fully aware that her pool had been drained years ago to cut costs. Then, leaning in slightly, I added, "Oh, by the way, I saw your husband and his brother dining with your niece at that hotel restaurant downtown. Such a close-knit family." As I spoke, I pulled out a carefully cropped photo on my phone, making sure to exclude any details that might reveal Ansley's identity. My mother-in-law's face hardened as she stared at the image. "Send it to me," she hissed through clenched teeth before storming off. The morning of the party, I was jolted awake by the sound of someone fiddling with the lock on the guest room door. It was Ava, trying to pick it. I waited silently, amused, until she finally gave up and walked away, muttering to herself. Moments later, I heard her on the phone, inviting family members to the party. Through the surveillance system, I listened to every call, amused at the lengths she had to go to get them to agree. She bribed Hannah and Amanda with a share of the $4,000 monthly trust payout just to secure their attendance. Lucas and Ryan were even easier to sway. She dangled the promise of a ménage à trois to lure them in. Her parents, initially uninterested, became enthusiastic when they heard about the potential $20,000 a month increase. Her dad even started scheming with Ava, brainstorming ways to cut me out of the trust once a baby was born. What cut the deepest, though, was hearing Ava negotiate with Chloe and Noah, our own kids. She had to promise them bigger allowances and future car upgrades just to get them to treat me with basic respect. Even that wasn't enough, she had to threaten to take away their phones, allowances, and any chance of vacations if they embarrassed her during the party. Begrudgingly, they agreed to behave. By this point, I wasn't hurt. For years, I'd thought of them more like angry stepchildren than my own. That's how they treated me, and I'd come to expect nothing less in this house. When the party finally arrived, it felt like I'd hit the jackpot. Everyone acted overly polite, their fake smiles barely masking the tension in the room. Ava's parents greeted me with exaggerated warmth, a stark contrast to their usual disdain. Lucas and Ryan tried to play the role of friendly exes, though it was clear they were struggling to keep up the facade. I played along, complimenting people and pretending not to notice the forced cheerfulness. At one point, I casually mentioned to Amanda that I'd run into her boss at a downtown hotel. Her face turned ashen, and she stumbled over her words, trying to laugh it off. I knew exactly where she'd been the night before, and I had no intention of letting her forget it. Later, I found Lucas and Ryan hanging out by the bar and struck up a conversation about their lives post-divorce. When they mentioned a particular club, I couldn't resist smirking. "Oh, that place," I said. "I hear it's where divorced guys go to get drunk and get taken advantage of." They laughed nervously, unsure whether I was joking. Throughout the night, I kept my cool, fully aware that I was holding all the cards. Toward the end of the evening, I approached my father-in-law and casually remarked, "I think I saw you and your brother having dinner at a restaurant the other day with a young woman named Ansley." Small world, huh? The icy glare my mother-in-law shot in his direction could have stopped a freight train. What she didn't know was that Ansley was a transgender woman they'd met at a hotel. My father-in-law stammered something about a business meeting before excusing himself, his drink still full. Clearly, he hadn't planned on her finding out. Later that evening, I found myself alone with my mother-in-law by the pool. Trying to keep the conversation light, I commented on how nice it was to have everyone together. She nodded, her expression tight, and mentioned that Lucas and Ryan had decided to become roommates. The way she said it made it clear she suspected there might be more to their new living arrangement than just friendship. Switching topics, I brought up how Chloe and Noah had been doing well in school and suggested a pool party to motivate them. Of course, I knew her pool had been drained years ago to save money, but I couldn't resist the jab. Then, with perfect timing, I leaned in and mentioned seeing her husband and his brother at a hotel restaurant with her niece. Pulling up a carefully edited photo on my phone, I showed her a version that cropped out the high heels and subtly raised the napkin on her husband's lap. She stared at it for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. "Send it to me," she muttered, her voice low and full of tension. Still gripping the phone, she handed me her glass and said, "Can you get me another soda, please?" I walked to the kitchen but kept an eye on her through the corner of my eye. She immediately rushed over to her husband and daughters, whispering furiously. When they noticed me watching, they all turned away, trying to act casual. Moments later, she grabbed her husband's hand, and the two of them left the party without another word. Not long after, the three sisters stormed into the house, their faces flushed with anger. They cornered me, taking turns berating me for upsetting their mother. I shrugged it off, indifferent to their tantrums. From that day forward, my mother-in-law never spoke to me directly again, and I considered that a victory. With that drama behind me, I shifted my focus to Tara, my boss Jason's secretary. She was a 5 feet 8 inches divorcee, still bitter after her husband's infidelity. Initially, I hadn't planned to involve her in any of my schemes, but after looking into court records and overhearing her vent about Jason and her dissatisfaction with where her life had ended up, I saw an opportunity. I already had some discreet photos of Jason and Tara leaving a hotel together. The images weren't explicit but showed just enough physical engagement to be damning. I sent the photos to Jason's wife. That evening, she confronted him, laying out their ground rules: no public displays, nothing near the children, and never in their home. Jason tried to argue, but she stood firm, clearly not someone who would be easily swayed. I knew I needed to push things further. By Monday, Jason had fired Tara, no doubt under pressure from his wife. I was waiting outside the building when Tara emerged, visibly upset and carrying a small box of her belongings. "Hi, Tara. Everything okay?" I asked, feigning casual concern. She stopped and sighed heavily. "I just got fired," she said, clearly struggling to keep her frustration in check. "Sorry to hear that," I said, my tone sympathetic. "Can we talk? I might have something you'll want to hear." She narrowed her eyes, her suspicion evident. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice guarded. "I want to offer you a job," I said plainly. Her eyebrows rose. "Doing what?" "Sales," I explained. "At my software company." Her expression shifted to cautious curiosity. "I didn't know you owned a software company." "Wait, how did you know I'd be fired today?" she asked, sharp as ever. Meeting her gaze, I replied, "Let's just say I've been keeping tabs on the competition, and I didn't want to miss out on someone with your skills." She crossed her arms, getting straight to the point. "How much?" "Same salary you had at Jason's company, plus 20%. But you'll need to cover your own apartment. I know your current place is tied to the company books, and I want to avoid any strings," I clarified. "Deal," she said without hesitation. "When do I start?" "You already have," I answered with a smile. "I'll pick you up around the corner so Jason doesn't see you. Knowing him, he's probably watching." As I walked away, I glanced back just in time to see Tara flipping off Jason's office window. Smiling, I picked her up as planned, and we headed to my house. During the drive, the conversation turned personal. I shared a bit about my marriage, including the fact that Ava and I hadn't been intimate in over 2 years. Tara gave me a sideways glance and asked, "You're joking, right?" "Not since I found out she was cheating," I admitted, the weight of the admission pressing down on me. I explained that I wouldn't be married much longer but needed Ava's cooperation to finalize my separation from Jason's company. I asked Tara to keep everything under wraps. She smiled warmly, and for a moment, I was struck by how captivating her brown eyes were. When we arrived at my house, Hannah was already there, her tone dripping with suspicion. "Who's this?" she snapped. "This is my new head of sales and marketing," I replied, making it clear who held the reins. Hannah gave a reluctant nod, her expression far from welcoming. Tara seemed a bit surprised by her new title but settled into the role as I set her up at a desk next to mine. We spent the day reviewing the software I'd developed. She was visibly impressed, particularly with the sales module. Over the past 2 years, I had rebuilt every one of Jason's programs from scratch. The updated system was faster, more compact, and far more intuitive than anything he had. To get Tara started, I handed her a few promising leads, and she quickly scheduled appointments for demos. She was a natural, proving she'd be a valuable addition to my team. Before she left, I mentioned that I'd be having a conversation with Ava in the kitchen and suggested she keep an ear out. "I might need your help tonight," I said cryptically, hinting at the gravity of the situation. Later that evening, I called Ava into the kitchen. "We need to talk," I said bluntly. "What about?" she asked cautiously. "I'm not going to have sex with you," I told her without hesitation. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "But, we've been getting along so well," she protested. I didn't mince words. "I need you and your sisters to sleep with someone." "What? We're not hookers." She shot back, her voice rising in indignation. I stayed calm, laying out the terms. "What if I promised to give you a divorce so you could remarry and have a legitimate baby?" Ava's demeanor shifted immediately. "You'd let me divorce you without citing infidelity?" she asked, her tone turning cautious but intrigued. "That's right," I confirmed. A slow smile spread across her face. Who do we have to sleep with? My boss, Jason, I said plainly. You and your sisters need to meet him at a hotel room tonight. Ava tried to negotiate for another day, but I insisted it had to happen that evening. He just broke things off with his girlfriend, I explained. He'll be looking for a rebound. Her eyes narrowed. Who's going to watch the kids? Tara and I will, I assured her. To sweeten the deal, I handed her a brand new designer purse. Here's a gift, I said, pointing out the hidden cameras embedded in the lining. Just make sure the view isn't obstructed. Her unease deepened as she examined the purse. I'm not sure I'm comfortable being recorded, she said hesitantly. I didn't hold back. I've already got weeks of footage of you with Lucas, Ryan, and Holly. Don't pretend you're shy now. Her face fell, her voice dropping to a whisper. You have videos of me with Lucas, Ryan, and Holly? Yep, I said firmly. And plenty more. She swallowed hard. If I do this, will you delete all the recordings? Absolutely, I promised. Do this for me, and they're gone. Resigned, Ava nodded. Fine. I'll call my sisters. Within 20 minutes, Hannah and Amanda showed up, wearing outfits so revealing I wondered where they'd been hiding them. The promise of free babysitting, drinks, and a hotel suite with a new guy must have been too tempting to resist. Once they were gathered, I showed them a picture of Jason. This is the guy. I want you to wear him out, I instructed. Their eager smiles made it clear they were up for the challenge. As they left, Tara and I settled the kids in front of the TV before retreating to my office. While Tara focused on client leads, I monitored the situation through the hidden cameras embedded in Ava's purse. Jason arrived at the hotel bar as expected, but to my surprise, he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by Rachel, one of his employees. Tara noticed immediately and muttered, "She's not wasting any time." Without missing a beat, Tara snapped a photo of Rachel and sent it to her boyfriend, Adam, along with a short text, "You should check on her." Minutes later, Rachel's phone buzzed, and an argument erupted. The exchange was heated, and it wasn't long before Rachel stormed out of the bar, leaving Jason alone and bewildered. Sensing her moment, Ava called out, "Forget her, Jason. Come join us." She motioned for him to sit at their table. Jason, ever the opportunist, didn't hesitate. Drinks flowed freely, and before long, they were all heading up to a hotel suite. Once inside, chaos erupted. Clothes flew, and the scene on the bed became something straight out of a bad reality show. For the next 25 minutes, Jason looked like he'd won the lottery. I glanced over at Tara, who was clearly flustered but said nothing. "I can turn this off if it's too much," I offered, glancing at Tara. She stood suddenly, her voice soft as she said, "The kids are asleep." Without another word, she locked the office door behind her and returned, her expression unreadable. "I need you," she said simply. After 2 years of living without intimacy, I wasn't about to refuse. What happened next was intense and unexpected, a release of tension right there in the office. Once it was over, we resumed watching the footage, though the atmosphere between us had shifted entirely. "They might actually kill him," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Jason, typically a one-and-done kind of guy, had taken 2 Viagra pills, Ava's doing, and the sisters weren't letting up. For hours, they kept him occupied, turning the night into a marathon. Eventually, Tara and I slipped into the guest room, took a shower together, and set an early alarm to avoid any awkward run-ins the next morning. The next day, I fast-forwarded through the remainder of the footage. For over 3 hours, the sisters had worked Jason like a human amusement park. He didn't seem to mind, his smug grin plastered across his face. Tara was ready to leave, but I convinced her to stay for breakfast. She made pancakes for the kids, who stared in amazement, clearly unaccustomed to home-cooked meals. By the time Ava and her sisters returned around 11 a.m., they looked thoroughly exhausted, their clothes disheveled and makeup smeared. Jason, on the other hand, wore a dazed but satisfied expression, as if he'd just won a grand prize. Ava collapsed onto the couch, giving me a lazy smile. Mission accomplished, she muttered, clearly pleased with herself. I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. Good. Jason's hooked now. Call him tomorrow and arrange a follow-up. Her smile faltered. Tomorrow? We need a break. You don't get a break, I said firmly. You wanted this lifestyle, remember? You get the trust fund, you play the game. Hannah, sprawled out in an armchair, groaned. You're really pushing this. What's in it for you? I smirked. Let's just say this is part of a bigger plan. Trust me, you'll thank me later. The sisters exchanged uneasy glances but didn't argue further. Reluctantly, Ava agreed to call Jason, and I laid out the strategy. Keep him interested, but don't make it too easy. The more he chases, the more he'll bend to your will. That evening, I reviewed the footage again, skipping through the explicit parts. My focus wasn't on the physical acts but on Jason's reactions. He was clearly infatuated, which was exactly what I needed for the next phase of my plan. The following day, Ava arranged another meetup with Jason. Somehow, Lucas and Ryan ended up involved, turning the night into a chaotic mess. I decided to skip the live feed and review the recordings later. Instead, I spent the evening with Tara, who was quickly becoming my confidant and partner in crime. The next morning, Ava and her sister stumbled back into the house looking even more drained than before. Jason, on the other hand, seemed reinvigorated, his confidence soaring. He's on a high now, I told Tara as we reviewed the footage. But it won't last. He's going to crash soon. As predicted, Jason's life began unraveling by the end of the week. Balancing his personal escapades and professional responsibilities became too much for him. It was time to escalate. I rented a fully furnished downtown apartment across from Jason's office, stocking it with everything the sisters would need. It became their new base of operations, ensuring Jason stayed within their grasp. To keep Hannah and Amanda motivated, I promised them a share of Ava's future $20,000 a month trust fund payout once her divorce was finalized. Ava agreed to the arrangement, knowing her sisters would leech off her regardless. With everyone on board, the plan moved forward seamlessly. Eventually, I compiled a highlight reel of Jason's escapades and sent it anonymously to his wife. The faces of the sisters were blacked out, leaving Jason's identity unmistakable. The response was immediate. Furious and humiliated, Jason's wife didn't confront him directly. Instead, she filed for divorce the very next day. The fallout hit Jason like a freight train. His wife froze his accounts, leaving him scrambling to pay his bills. Word of the scandal spread quickly, and his professional reputation took a nosedive. Employees began jumping ship, including 3 of his top managers, who accepted offers to join my company. Within weeks, Jason's company was teetering on the brink of collapse. By the time his divorce was finalized, he had lost everything: his wife, his finances, and his clients. I swooped in and absorbed the remnants of his business, ensuring my own company thrived in the aftermath.